I'm Rachel.
And I'm Trystan.
And today is Monday, so that means it's another Marvel Monday. Today we're going to be reviewing the 2011 Marvel movie Thor. This is the movie, of course, directed by Kenneth Branagh and written by Ashley Miller, Zach Stentz, and Don Payne. And it is starring Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Natalie Portman as Jane Foster, Tom Hiddleston as Loki, Anthony Hopkins as Odin, Stellan Skarsgård as Eric Selvig, and Kat Dennings as Darcy Lewis. Alright, so this is going to be a nitty-gritty review, so we're going to be going through every category of the grid, and I know we have a lot to say about this movie, so this is probably going to be a little bit of a longer review. I think we've got lots of good things to say.
Oh yeah.
And before we really get started with the grid, if you're interested in taking a look at our grid rating system, you can go ahead and check that out over at the Gritty Films website. So that's going to be grittyfilms.com/thegrid, and then that's going to be Gritty Films, spelled GRIDDY films.com. But before we jump into the grid, I just want to talk a little bit, like we usually do, just about our experiences with this movie and all that good stuff. So was this one, had you seen this movie in theaters?
Yes, I did. With you. It was the first Marvel movie we saw together.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, because I saw the release date of 2011. I'm like, we were together then. Was this the first one I took you to?
Yeah.
And I couldn't remember. I don't know if I should admit that. I didn't remember, but...
I did remember.
So was this the first Marvel movie you had seen then?
I doubt it, because I doubt you would take me to see a movie that's the fourth movie in a series without watching the first three movies.
All right, fair enough. About how many times we've probably seen it about the same amount of times then.
I've probably seen it 5 times.
That seems about right.
More than any of the others.
Yeah, this is definitely, I think, has more repeatability.
Oh yeah, and me too. First of all, just because I love this movie so much, and there's so much in it, I still notice things for the first time. Oh
yeah, me too. There were several things, or at least a couple things. It's not that crazy. There were a few things that I noticed this time around that I hadn't noticed before. Yeah, I just think this is just a well-crafted movie, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So that said, should we just hop right into the grid and get into our love of Thor?
Sounds good.
All right.
I can't wait.
All right, so the first category of the grid is going to be writing, plot, and genre. Is there anything you want to start us off with this category?
I don't even know where to begin.
There is a lot to cover. I just think right off the bat, this is probably the most well-structured script within the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah?
I just think the plot structure is solid, and it's just so about the characters, which of course we'll get into in the next category.
Yeah,
but yeah. But the characters drive the plot, and really, well, I guess that's it. Just the characters drive the plot in ways that tend to get lost in a lot of movies, and especially superhero movies, where it's usually,
right, here's
the bad guy, here's the good guy. Good guy's gonna fight the bad guy. And even Iron Man, which I really like that movie, that's pretty much the movie.
Right.
Is Tony Stark builds a suit, another person builds a suit, now they're gonna fight.
Yeah.
And there's just so much more complexity to this, and it's so just Shakespearean, and not just, obviously people talk about the dialogues and the accents and all of that good stuff that give it that vibe, and obviously we've got Kenneth Branagh as the director, which we'll get into much more, or at least I know I will, in some of the later categories. So there are other things at work, but even just the plot structure, two brothers both vying for the throne.
Right.
One brother, tricks the father into banishing the other, or manipulates the situation at least to get the end result that he wants, and, lying and betrayal, and, having to prove your worth and prove you can be king. Like, it's just such a classic story, and so Shakespearean, and just phenomenally well done. I cannot say enough good things about, particularly the plot structure is just on point.
Yeah.
But even just every subcategory within this category is just phenomenally strong. You have like I was saying, the outer goals that drive the plot, and you have Thor's, his outer goals change pretty fluidly as he grows as a character. As his internal needs change and are met, or at least developed in different ways. As those more emotional things develop, the outer goals start to shift. And so it starts off being, very selfish. gonna defeat the frost giants. I want to go to war, and then I need to find my hammer because I need to get my power back. And then by the end of the movie, it's, you know, I need to solve this problem with my brother to save all these other people's lives, so I'm going to sacrifice myself.
Right. And he focuses on getting all the innocent people out of the way.
Exactly.
Rather than, you know, having a good time smashing things.
Exactly. And I love that, you know, when we see him fight the frost giants and his friends are falling in battle around him, and they're like, hey, we need to retreat. And he's like, yeah, you do whatever you want. I'm going to keep fighting. Whatever. Like, he doesn't even seem to care.
Right. He's like smiling and laughing and having a good time.
Exactly. And then by the end, it's very much so, you know, it's the opposite. Like, he's still telling them to go and he's going to stay and fight, but it's the motivations are so different. He's, you know, going to them and helping them escape and convincing them. Like, you know, Sif is saying, like, you know, I'm gonna die next to you in battle. It's gonna be a worthy death. And he's like, no, like, you have fought valiantly. Go live to tell this story. Like, and then he convinces her to leave. So just the plot structure in that regard, that's dipping into characters, but I mean the plot is so tied to characters with this movie. So it's just, I mean, everything within this category I thought was really, really strong. There is one fault that I can find, but I'm hogging the conversation. I need to let you jump in here.
Well, so far I totally agree 100%, except the possibility that there may be some fault. I don't know about that. We'll see. Yeah, I love the structure. I love how he changes. I love the outer goals, all that. I also really liked how well it tied in with the other movies, especially with S.H.I.E.L.D. and the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. There were several references to other movies. Yeah. So that was really, really cool.
I liked that too. And I like that S.H.I.E.L.D. is such an antagonist in this movie. Like, they're not necessarily, like, they're not, we were just talking earlier about a completely different topic, but about how there's a difference between villains and antagonists. And I think that's, I wasn't sure I agreed with you. And then after thinking about it and applying it with this movie, I mean, because they are, there's no other way to categorize them. They are getting in the way of the protagonist's goals. That is the definition of an antagonist.
But they're not evil. They're not bad guys. They're just doing their own job. Right. But yeah, they're in the way still.
Yeah, so I did like that. And it's interesting, just thinking of this movie in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline. Like, we have, you know, Iron Man kind of deals with S.H.I.E.L.D. and I don't even remember if Incredible Hulk did. I feel like maybe there were references a little bit. I guess it was mostly the government with that one, though. But so we have, like, little bits of S.H.I.E.L.D. there, and they're kind of, like, a nuisance a little bit for Tony Stark, and that's about it.
Agent Coulson just seemed like a kid who was pestering him too much.
Right. So then to jump from that to this, where S.H.I.E.L.D. is, like, the Men in Black, or, you know, they're the bad guys in a lot of ways. And then right after this, we have Captain America, where it's, like, the birth of S.H.I.E.L.D., and they're kind of morally ambiguous, at least, like, as far as, like, wanting to create a super soldier to fight in the army. Like, there's a lot of iffiness, but they're the good guys. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie. We'll talk about it much more next week. Yeah. But yeah, so then that, S.H.I.E.L.D. plays an interesting role in that. And then jumping to Avengers, where S.H.I.E.L.D. is a good guy. Like, it's just... Yeah. Just thinking of it in terms of the timeline is just really interesting. I thought they handled it really well, of being like, well, like, yeah, they kind of do these things that are annoying, but, like, they are the good guys. But they're still, like...
Right. Dr. Selvig even says that one of his coworkers was, like, the leading pioneer in gamma radiation. Yeah. But then he disappeared after talking to S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah. Which... one, ties it into the rest of the universe, and two, shows that they're the antagonists. Yeah, and a Bruce Banner reference. Yeah, so. Exactly. All right, was there anything else you wanted to add before I mention my flaw? No, not for the plot and genre and world building.
All right. So the one thing that bothers me a little bit within the plot structure, and this might be getting a little nitpicky, one of the things that bothers me is the love interest, or the relationship that forms between them. Like, I'm so on board for the first two acts, because it's like this weird, like, she's almost starstruck around him, like, more so than, like, flirtatious. Like, it's almost like not even necessarily because he's like a god, because she doesn't quite know that until later, but it's like, oh, he could be the key to my research. Like, it's like this curiosity and like wanting to, like, this search for knowledge, and like it's more of that, and it's still like that's tied in with the flirtation. Certainly I'm not saying there's not that there, but like that's the motivation for it. It's like she wants answers and she sees the answers in him, and so like she's attracted to him, and he's Thor, so I mean, of course there's going to be attraction. And then he is just kind of going along with it. Like, he's just like, sure, this is cool. I'm on an adventure and I met someone cool. Like, so it just seems like almost like a juvenile infatuation, flirtation.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, like sexually charged for sure. But it doesn't feel like they fell in love, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. Like, it's like, oh, they just have like this fun, flirtatious, you know, they've got chemistry there, they're curious about each other, it's fun. And then all of a sudden in the last act, it's like, I'll come back for you, and she's searching for him ceaselessly, and it just turns into this, like, they're each other's soulmates, and I'm like, where did this come from? They had, like, a brief flirtation, like, they were cute, I want them to work it out, but, like, what? Where? It just seemed to come out of nowhere.
It did seem a little much. I think she could be searching for him, not, like, because they're soulmates, and not just because of that, but still because he's part of this whole puzzle that she's figuring out. But yeah, I think a large part of it is, you know, she looks like what she looks like, he looks like what he looks like, so they have to get together.
And I mean, I don't blame him. If I was Chris Hemsworth, I would be attracted to Natalie Portman. If I was Natalie Portman, I'd be attracted to Chris Hemsworth. Like, they're ridiculously attractive individuals. So I mean, and that's why, like, I get the sexual tension, I get the flirtatiousness, I get the chemistry, like, all of it makes sense. Yeah. It's just that sudden switch in the last act to, like, oh, this isn't just flirtatious, we're totally in love, guys. And just every time, it bothers me enough that I did take some points off.
I know what you mean, and I think I agree that they went a little too much with the relationship thing, but I thought that was just sort of like, you have to do that in this kind of movie. You have to have the love interest. You have to do that. It didn't bother me that much. Yeah. But I agree that some people could consider that a flaw in the writing.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add for writing, plot, and genre?
No, I don't think so.
All right. What was your final score?
9.6. Outstanding.
I gave it a 9.7. Outstanding. All right, so that brings us to the second category, which is going to be writing characters. We kind of started to dip our toes in this a little bit. Yeah. And I think it's just definitely, the whole plot is driven by Thor's inner needs, which I just love. Oh, yeah. I mean, his whole thing is like he's a arrogant, aggressive prince, and he needs to learn to be like a wise king, and he needs to learn what it means to lead. Like, that's his whole deal. He needs to become worthy. And it's just great. And as far as origin stories go, like, it's fantastic. Just because, like, it's not about the powers you have, it's about what you do to earn it.
Right.
Which is just
your character.
Exactly. So I just love that the focus is on, you know, are you worthy of having these powers, not how did you get these powers? Which, I mean, he gets the powers because of his worth, but it's just a different focus, which I really like, and I think it makes his origin story by far the best in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think this is a really great origin story, and it's interesting that it starts out with him, seconds away from being crowned king, and then it all falls to shit because he's an arrogant boy. Right. They call him that many, many times. And I think that's really great. And he has to make himself worthy. It's, by far my favorite origin story in Marvel. I also think that Loki is also a really interesting character.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just, he's not a bad guy just because he wants power or because he just woke up and decided to be evil or whatever. He feels justified, and maybe he is justified. And it's at least understandable.
Yeah, he is a really interesting character. I guess I don't have much to add to that. I'm just agreeing.
One of the things that I like about Loki that's pretty uncommon for the villain is that, like I just said, I can understand why they believe this. Right. maybe it is justified. Like, if you look at it a certain way and you maybe ignore a few things here and there, it actually is justified. And that's pretty rare. But what's even more rare than that is when the good guy also sees that the person has a point. And even if they don't agree with it, they'll take it into consideration, or it will change them somehow. Because in the end, he ends up defeating the Destroyer by apologizing to his brother and sacrificing himself, and that proves that he's worthy, and then he beats the shit out of it. But ultimately, it's because he tried to save everyone else first, and then he told his friends, I have a plan. And you think it's going to be something badass, but he just apologizes. And I thought that was really cool.
I agree. Yeah, I think they always say, like, a villain, like, is never the villain of their own story. Like, everybody is the hero from their perspective. And I think that's almost always lost in Marvel movies. And Loki, I think that's one of the reasons, if not the reason, that he's, not just a favorite villain for fans, but he's, like, a favorite character. Like, he's just a fan favorite in general. Oh, yeah. And I think it's because he has that aspect of, like he is 100% the hero in his story. Like, he's doing things that he think are just, and he wants to be equals with Thor, and that's why he wants to take the throne, and he wants to, get revenge for his not his adoption necessarily, but the lies he's been told, and like he's upset about that, and that's not only
totally
was he
understandable.
Like, he was adopted without being told, and it was from the kingdom's worst enemy, and he's basically like a pawn of his father's to be like, I wanted, like, peace between the kingdoms, so I just kind of took you, and surprise.
Shakespearean.
Exactly.
Or like old Greek mythology or something. Yeah.
It's just great character arcs all around, like, not just with Thor, but with Loki as well, which is super rare, and one of the reasons this is one of the best movies, in my opinion, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
It's also great that this whole thing was, like, orchestrated by him. This was all some genius plan of his,
right?
And it worked.
Agreed.
Classic trickster.
I also really like, I do think it's worth talking a little bit about the dialogue in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
It's just so, I talked a little bit, obviously, about how, it's very Shakespearean, which I think is part of what makes it so unique. You have, Tony Stark has a very unique way of speaking as well, and then you have this very, no pun intended, stark contrast of, he's very blunt and quick and acerbic, and then you have, this Shakespearean Thor come into the picture. So it just adds variety to the characters within the MCU as a whole, and it's just some really well-written stuff. Like, just great dialogue all around. And even the stuff on Earth, like, you have, like, some of Jane Foster's lines are great, and a lot of it's just the delivery, which we'll get to in acting and casting, but, like, when she's at the hospital, it's like, what's his name? It's like, he said it was Thor? And, like, that shouldn't be that funny of a line, but just between... just the context and the delivery, like, there's just little things like that that's just great within the dialogue, and I think it's because of the contrast between this highly Shakespearean, highly fantasy-driven, epic that's happening, but it's happening in the real world. So you have this great contrast. And I think Darcy, that character as well, is just a great, although she gets a little heavy-handed at times, but for most of the movie, she does a great job of balancing a lot of that too.
All three of them, Darcy, Jane, and Eric Selvig. I noticed that this time when they're on screen for, like, the first 10 minutes that they're on screen, almost every single line that they deliver is funny. I don't know how they do it, but almost every single line is funny. It's
just great chemistry, I guess, or just good comedic timing between the three. They're just, man, we'll get more into it in the next category, but the acting and casting combined with the excellent script, just really, man, they got the combination just right.
I also scored the dialogue really high, and part of the reason is because there's a lot of subtle hints and a lot of subtleties once you've seen this a few times. Like, Odin tells his two kids, you were both born to rule, but only one of you can ascend the throne. Once you realize that Loki should be the king of the ice giants, that takes on a different tone. And there was just a ton of humor.
I noticed that too, especially in comparison with the movies we've watched so far. We've talked a lot in the last 3 reviews about how, like, well, it's kind of still getting its footing.
Yeah.
I kept saying, like, I think we have to wait till Avengers. And I'm like, no, it really kind of starts here.
I almost said something last time, but I didn't want to spoil the surprise.
I mean, I remembered there being humor, but not quite as much. Which is just really good, too, because, like, a lot of people criticize this movie because they feel like Thor should be a sillier character overall, and they thought that this movie took his character too seriously by making it so Shakespearean. That's one of the criticisms I've heard. And we'll get more once we go through the whole grade and give our final scores and everything. I'd like to address some of the common complaints in much more detail, because I do think it's interesting that a lot of people don't like this movie nearly as much as we do.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
So I'd like to give some counter arguments to some of the common complaints. Yeah, so but one of the complaints that I hear a lot is that, you know, this movie just takes Thor too seriously. But I thought they did a really good job of balancing the silliness of the character, but still having, like, you know, he's not the butt of the joke, he's just a fish out of water, and there's a little bit of humor there.
Yeah. I mean, the whole first 40 minutes of the movie is him getting hit by cars, him not knowing what's going on, him getting tasered 2 or 3 times, him getting injected with drugs and passing out, him getting the crap beat out of him. It's like, I don't know. It does take him seriously, but at the same time, I think it's dumped on a lot. And there is also just amazing humor all around him. So that's kind of weird. One last thing for dialogue. I just noticed this watching it this time for like the 5th or 6th time. And it was just another one of those little things that really adds to it. A very subtle thing. Towards the end, Thor is talking to Agent Coulson, and he calls him Son of Coal. And he does it so quick, and so he delivers it so straightly that it didn't even faze me the first 5 times I've seen this.
I didn't even notice it this time until you repeated the line, and I was like, that is what he just said.
Yeah, it's just a really funny, clever little thing. That's good writing.
That is good writing. I did want to ask, I don't know that this is even really important in the grand scheme of things. I'm just curious, because I feel like my opinion changes every single time I watch this movie. But what is your take on Sif and her relationship with Thor? Like, are they strictly, like, warriors that fight side by side, or is she in love with him?
Well, that's complicated. I'm a huge fan of Norse mythology, and I'll get to that later. In Norse mythology, Sif is Thor's wife.
Okay.
But I don't think she's like this warrior maiden. I think she's more of like the harvest goddess.
Okay, interesting. Because I remember, like, the first time I watched it, like, I remember being so impressed that we have that. I'm like, oh, we, like, fight side by side with a female warrior, and there's not, like, this awkward, like, love triangle or sexual tension or anything between them. And then I feel like every time I see it... Yeah. I don't think it's mutual. Like, he doesn't seem to... Like, I think in his mind, it's strictly, like, she's one of my warrior buddies. But then it's all in her, almost all just in her facial reactions, which we'll get more into in the next category. But just like, you know, like when he gets his armor and you see her face, like she is so happy. And it's a great moment, but it's like, man, I think there's something else behind that. And then there's that really interesting conversation between Sif and, damn, I forgot her name, his mom. But there's that great conversation where like, there's, like, a hint of sadness where, like, you know, she says, like, oh, I'm sorry for your loss. And then, you know, she's like, oh, how is he doing? And it's like, she just says straightforward, like, you know, he mourns for his brother and he misses the love of his life, I guess, or whatever we're going with.
I don't think she words it that way.
No, she just says her, but yeah, she's like, you know, and he misses her. And it's not, like, there doesn't seem to be any jealousy at all. Like, it's not like, oh man, I'll change his mind someday. Like, there doesn't seem to be any kind of hint of, like, you know, like I said, like jealousy or, you know, like she wants to win him over something. Like, but there is, like, a sadness there, and it's hard to tell if it's, like, is she sad for him because, like, she loves him as a comrade and he's going through, you know, some pretty major emotions, or is it that, you know, she's sad that he's mourning for someone else instead of going after her? Like, there's just a complexity there. which I find really interesting. And I just think, I mean, she's such a minor character, but I do find myself kind of fascinated by her.
If I remember correctly, I think they addressed that a little more in the second movie.
Oh, I try to forget the second movie.
Yeah. Don't ruin this conversation by mentioning... I guess I'm the one who mentioned the second movie.
Yeah, well, it had to come up eventually, but we'll get there soon enough.
We'll get back on track.
All right, so I suppose that's finally about all I have to say about writing characters. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
We don't have time for all the positive things I could say about this.
All right. So what was your score for writing characters?
Perfect 10 out of 10.
All right. I gave it a 9.9 out of 10. I took off just a little bit for character development, which just go back to, I also took it off for plot structure for the same reason, but it did bother me enough that I feel justified, and it's for that love interest and that, like, I just feel like or not the love interest, but just that relationship. Like, I was so on board with it just being like this cute, flirtatious, like, this is new and exciting, cool. And then it just flips in that last act, and I feel like they could have either developed it more throughout the rest of the movie to make that feel more realistic, or just not had it end that way. Just have it be like, well, that was fun while it lasted.
Yeah. Well, she did see him sacrifice himself, and he came back from the dead, and he's dressed like Thor now, so... And
so I could kind of see, like, her, like, being more attached to him because of that experience, but, like, what is he? Like, why is he still...
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seemed too... There just needed more development there, so I knocked it off a half a point for character development.
9.9.
9.9 out of 10 for characters. I almost gave it a perfect 10, just because I did knock a little bit off in plot and genre for the same reason, but like I said, I feel like it falls under both, and I feel like it bothered me within both contexts, so there you have it. But still, 9.9, that's pretty damn close to perfect, so...
Yeah.
Alright, so that's going to bring us to the next category, which is going to be acting and casting. And I will say, right at the top of this category, I'm, like, obsessed with Natalie Portman. You know this. Anybody who knows me knows this. I think she is hands down the most talented actor of our generation. She's just amazing. So I'm gonna have a lot of good things to say in this category because I just like her so much.
Yeah.
But that said, I do think that the acting in general, not just her, like Chris Hemsworth is amazing, Natalie Portman's amazing, Anthony Hopkins is amazing, Tom Hiddleston, amazing. Like, I mean, I could just, the list goes on. Yep. Like every single person was just perfectly cast, so well acted within the roles. The facial expressions throughout are amazing. This is just it's solid, and it's to the point. A lot of people are going to disagree with me on this one, but like it's to the point where I'm like, you can tell the Academy Award just is never going to nominate a superhero movie because they would have nominated this one. Like I think Anthony Hopkins could have easily gotten one for Best Supporting Actor, if nothing else.
Oh, yeah.
I could maybe not Chris Hemsworth. I didn't look to see what competition he was up against. I don't know what movies were getting awards in 2011. But easily, and even Tom Hiddleston for Best Supporting Actor. Like the performances
he just nailed it.
Yeah, it's like, just...
He was Loki, the trickster god.
Yes, and not just with the line deliveries, like the facial expressions and the nuances and the postures and just everything within the performances, top notch.
Yeah, even the kids, the two kids that they got to play, young Thor and young Loki, like if you look at their expressions, child Loki is looking at child Thor like, oh, come on. This again? Jesus, dude, calm down.
Yeah, and even just their physical, like even if they were awful actors, which they weren't, they were phenomenal especially for their ages. But just their look, like they looked like young Chris Hemsworth and young Tom Hiddleston. Like it was really, really great casting there. So I mean, they easily could have just been like, here's a blonde kid, here's a dark-haired kid, bam. Yeah. But I really feel like they took the time to find kids that had not just the looks, but also able to get that personality across. Like they really either looked out or looked really hard. I don't know which, but I completely agree.
Yeah, everyone just nailed it.
I also think there's just some really interesting choices within the casting that I'm totally on board for, like casting Idris Elba as a Norse god. Like, that's bold, but
doesn't make sense, but it works.
It works so well. And I should have looked up his name, but the Asian actor who plays one of his his warrior, like an Asian Norse god, sure, but it works, and like that character is great. Like it's just, like, choices like that. That's like this is one of the only movies that you could look at and be like, they easily could have just cast a bunch of like white people because it's Norse, like they're Vikings,
blonde hair, blue eyes.
Exactly, and they somehow managed to get away from that and make it work, and it works like so well. So I applaud, not just, I mean, it's great that there's diversity, but then just the way they were able to get this cast together and create these characters and this universe. Like, man, the acting and casting is solid in this movie.
I agree.
I did knock a little bit down for line deliveries almost exclusively, and I feel bad saying this because I like her a lot, but almost exclusively because of Kat Dennings, which it's hard to say how much is the writing and how much was her line deliveries. But like I mentioned, Darcy.
Okay.
And she just, by the last act, I was kind of like, I'm kind of tired of this shtick or whatever she was doing. Like, it worked really well in the first 2 acts, and then by the last act it was kind of like, why are you here? And the few lines that she had in that act, it was just kind of like okay, that's not funny anymore, just go away.
Well, that's the authentic 18-year-old or whatever she's playing,
I suppose. Yeah, I guess that is true, but I did knock a little bit down there. And then extras, I didn't give a perfect 10 to, which extra is such a hard category to rate, because it's like, well, if you don't notice them, that's good, but then how do you rate that? But I gave it an 8 out of 10 for the extras, which is mostly because like that New Mexico town, like, who lived there? There was like nobody there hardly. It just seemed really sparsely and it was supposed to be a small town, but it seemed a little too small. I don't like. There's it's not like downtown New York where the sidewalks are crammed full. But there should be a couple people on the sidewalks.
I think there was in almost all the scenes.
Were there?
But yeah, it was a small, sparsely populated town in the middle of some horrible desert that no one wants to live in. Yeah, I knocked off a little bit for extras and secondary characters. I don't quite remember why. I think it's just because for casting, for like the Warriors 3, I never read the comic, so I don't know. Like, I'm pretty sure they're very well cast because they're very like hitting those tropes. Like, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and you have your party going into the dungeon, this is what you would have. You would have the dwarf who eats all the time. You'd have the swashbuckling. What did they call him?
Robin Hood.
Robin Hood, yeah. You have the Robin Hood wannabe. You have some monk. Yeah, it's very tropey.
Yeah.
Which is good. I mean, that's appropriate. That makes sense.
Right.
But I don't feel comfortable giving that a perfect 10 because I don't know the source material to compare it to.
That's fair.
And that's not a Norse mythology thing. The Warriors 3 is something that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby invented.
Okay, I was curious about that. Do the other characters, do you know, like, do they, because like you said, Sif was his wife.
Yeah.
Were the other characters, like, also in mythology, but not within this band of warriors?
There was ice giants, and there were 9 realms, and there's Asgard and Odin, obviously, and Thor.
Well, yeah, I know all that stuff,
yeah.
But, like, what about the 3 warriors?
No, those were made up.
Okay, but not, I wonder why they included Sif in there. That's interesting. Well, is there anything else you want to add for acting and casting?
No, I think we said it all.
All right, what was your final score?
Acting and casting for me got a 9.6.
We were very close on this one. I gave it a 9.5. Also outstanding. All right, so that's going to bring us to cinematography lighting, which I could go on and on about with this one. Is there anything you want to say before I go on a rant? You can always interrupt my rants, by the way. I know I get going.
Yeah. Cinematography and lighting, I really liked it. There's a few things that stood out as, I guess you could call it, perfect.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah, I'd never want to say anything else about lighting. No, one of the things that I really liked is that a lot of the shots in Asgard, when they were close-ups, had like a magic hour hue to them. It was kind of a warm light on the horizon, especially towards the end when you have the profile of Odin and Thor.
Yeah.
And they're like standing side by side, staring off into the sunset while pining over his lost scientist girlfriend. That was a really great shot, and that lighting I really liked. And I also noticed that a lot of the colors of Asgard, especially when they were using the Bifrost or a few other subtle special effects, the white light was very clearly blue light and red light, and like a little bit of yellow, but kind of smeared together. I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it.
I think I know what you mean.
Like,
I don't quite know the technical terms to describe it either, but
it's like when the Bifrost drops Odin down on Jotunheim. It's the suburb. Jotunville. Yeah, when the Bifrost drops Odin down on Jotunheim, you get that like heavenly shaft of light, and it's not a pure white light, and it's kind of subtle, and that shows up in a few other things, like even the bridge itself going to the chamber room or whatever it is.
Yeah,
even that had that kind of lighting style to it. I thought that was really neat. I liked it.
All right, I really liked the lighting throughout, and particularly in comparison with the three Marvel movies we've seen so far, being Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, and Iron Man 2. I think in all three of those, we were both pretty much just like, it's what you would expect from a high-budget movie. It was fine. Right. And this movie just really just had its own look, its own style, color schemes that were really unique, and really just absolutely gorgeous. I think there's one movie that might be on par with it within the MCU as far as the beauty goes. But other than that, possible tie, like it is the most beautiful movie, visually speaking, within the MCU, and a lot of that comes from the lighting. It's just, I mean, it sets the mood perfectly throughout, like you were saying with that scene with Odin and Thor talking on the bridge. Like it just sets the mood so well, and the scenes with Thor and Jane, like regardless of what the mood is, like, and the more serious and intense scenes take on a darker kind of tone, or a more really stark lighting at times, like when he gets captured, for lack of a better word, by S.H.I.E.L.D., and the lighting becomes suddenly very washed out, very high key, meaning low contrast, like just very sterile lighting in that scene. It's like when all hope gets lost, when he's at his lowest, the lighting becomes very bland. And then when he has more hope, or when he's, more encouraged, or, whatever the case may be, the lighting gets much richer. So I really liked the things that the lighting did, within storytelling and setting the mood in that way. And then just the beauty, like I said, like, oh my God, it was so just gorgeous throughout. Just really, no matter what the scene, no matter what the mood it was setting, just absolutely gorgeous. That said, the only thing I knocked down within this category is going to be the realism, which I gave a 9.5 instead of a 10, largely because I think the focus was potentially a little bit too much on the beauty. I just went on and on about how beautiful it was. But my only complaint, and it's very small, I only took down, went from a 9.5 to a 10 in this one category, just because of all the magic hour. I know you mentioned it was one of the things you liked, and I loved it in Asgard, and I thought, it's a whole other realm. You can have whatever lighting, like who knows what time of day it is. It's irrelevant. Like it's just, it has its own lighting scheme, and that didn't bother me. But then in New Mexico, like every single time they were outside, it was magic hour. I'm like, do they do anything that's
it's too hot in the middle of the day?
But then it wasn't even night, except for when they went to get his hammer. So that, even though it did look absolutely gorgeous, it was kind of like this is a little heavy on the magic hour as far as like setting the timeline and being a little bit more realistic.
I agree. There were a few scenes where I almost thought that like there was that for a few years, and actually still now, a lot of movies will like crank up the orange and the blue, and there were a few scenes where I kind of wondered if they were doing that. But I think it was really it was magic hour.
Right. And it is in the New Mexico desert, so it is very orange to begin with, so I'm sure it doesn't take much of a sunset to get that magic hour look. That's probably one of the reasons they picked that location, is because you can have gorgeous lighting even when it's not magic hour, and it still gives it that look. So I'm sure that is a big part of it. So I'm sure I'm just being too nitpicky, but I did knock it down a bit for that.
Yeah, this is just a beautiful movie to look at.
It's just stunning.
Yeah.
All right, is there anything else you want to add about lighting before we give our final scores?
No, I thought the cinematography and lighting was beautiful.
All right, what was your final score?
9.6. Again, outstanding.
All right, and I, again, got a 9.9. Outstanding. All right, so that's going to bring us to cinematography camera work, which I think I have a hunch we're both going to have a lot to say about this category.
Yeah. I noticed something that I somehow didn't notice before. And once I noticed it, I could not unnotice it.
I have a feeling I know what you're going to say. What was the thing?
That was the Dutch angles.
There are a lot of Dutch angles in this movie.
I would not be surprised if more than 50% of the movie.
Oh, I think it's probably 70 or 80%.
Yeah.
At least a little. Some were more extreme than others, but
some were really extreme.
Yeah.
And for no reason that I could think of. Like, I could understand there's scenes where, Thor is talking to Loki and Loki's, tricking him.
Yeah.
Like, I could see having a Dutch angle to make the viewers kind of uneasy, kind of not really sure what's going on, kind of a little unbalanced. Like, that would make sense. I think that's why they do it. I don't know. But then there's just scenes where I have no idea why they're doing it. There's one scene where Thor defeats the Destroyer, gets his hammer back, becomes super badass, and then he's walking towards his friends that are standing on the street. And it's this extreme angle. And I don't know why.
I think I have mixed feelings on this, because I think it was fairly effective, but definitely overdone. Yeah. But I do think, in the beginning, when we first see, Asgard, it's almost exclusively Loki that's in a Dutch angle, and everyone else is pretty straight on. Which I think, like you were saying, it helps us feel a little uneasy and, maybe not even necessarily know why, but just be like, oh, something's off here, Yeah. So I think that was pretty effective. And then as far as the Earth scenes, I think it was meant to be, a way to make Earth feel like the foreign setting, and Asgard feel more natural, because most of Asgard was shot fairly, except for Loki, was shot fairly straight on, a little bit more symmetry, things like that.
Yeah.
And then on Earth, it was much more the Dutch angles and a little bit more asymmetrical and things like that within the framing. So I liked that a lot, and I thought it was fairly effective. But then, like you said, there were times when it's this is really extreme and it's noticeable and it's not apparent why. It's just the only thing I can think of is that it was a way to make Earth feel strange and different, because that's how Thor was seeing it. Okay. But it was even scenes where he wasn't in it, it felt that way, and it was just it was used a little too frequently, especially by the last act, when it's okay, everything's pretty well established, I think you can even it out a little bit more, and that never quite happened.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, so I don't know, I had mixed feelings about it. I mostly liked it, and I did really like that it was a way of stylizing the movie and making it feel different than other Marvel movies. Even now, with 19 movies out now, it still feels unique in that way. Oh, yeah. So I like that a lot, and I think it was mostly effective. It was just for sure overused, and some of the Dutch angles were very there were just establishing shots that were just diagonal almost, and it's this is just that's a little much. Mostly I liked it, but it was a little extreme.
That's pretty much what I thought. I almost knocked off quite a few points for that, but then I realized I've seen this movie 5 times and I'm just now noticing it.
Yeah.
So it can't be that bad. Sure. I'm not that oblivious.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we just said that I am. But I don't know, I can't fault it too much if it took 5 viewings for me to notice it. I don't know. Sure. Have you noticed this before? Is it?
I've noticed it before, but not in a bad way. I've always liked it. I think this was the first time where it maybe started to bother me a little bit.
Yeah.
But I have noticed it in the past. In fact, I feel like this might have been the movie where I taught you what a Dutch angle was, because you noticed it. Probably, obviously not as frequently or as memorably as with this viewing, but I feel like there might have been a shot where you're like, whoa, the camera's really tilted. And I'm like, that's a Dutch angle. Yeah. I'm a film nerd and I use pretentious film terms.
The Dutch angle really changes the mise-en-scène.
I did. It was a good transition, though. Speaking of the mise-en-scène, I thought just the compositions throughout, like obviously the camera angles, the Dutch angles were a big part of it, but I thought just the compositions were stunning throughout.
Oh yeah.
Even things like the frost giant scene where it's just dialogue between like Thor, Loki, and Laufey. That's his name, right? Laufey, yeah. He's not Malfoy from Harry Potter, but yeah, Laufey. When it's like the three of them talking, like some of those compositions are just stunning, and it's just people standing around talking. And I mean, it looks like a painting. And a lot of that was the lighting, like I was talking about, but even just the way people are framed and the close-ups, and then, you'll have like, a close-up of someone talking and then zoom way out to see like this extreme, all you can see is Thor's bright red cape surrounded by a bunch of people, a lot of that. And I just really liked the compositions. And I mean, it's Kenneth Branagh. It's not like doesn't know what he's doing, but...
Even the fight scenes, there was a lot of times there was like action in the foreground, but then there's also action in the background. There's someone else doing their thing. And I noticed a lot of the camera angles, other than the Dutch angles, there was a lot of things like Odin, I think, the camera was always looking up.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
And sometimes it was pretty extreme, but it seemed natural and it was very effective.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there were shots, you'd see... be looking up at Odin and then down on Loki. There was that a few times as well, although I guess it's kind of looking down at everybody a little bit because he's Odin. But just some of the different camera angles. And this is really, I feel like it's somewhat rare, and it shouldn't be for the camera to be a more active part of storytelling.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously some movies and some stories call for it more than others, but I just think this is a great example of, like, look how the camera can help tell this story, because it's just really effective. Yeah, I guess I'm just reiterating pretty much what you said, but I absolutely agree that just the camera work throughout was really stunning. All right, was there anything you wanted to add within this category?
I did notice that there were several scenes that stood out as scenes that I expect from this kind of movie, from a Marvel movie, and scenes that I want to see, like the heroic pose, or people, sort of assembling your crew. And I didn't notice that as much in the earlier Marvel movies, but I did notice that several times in this, or when they were like comparing characters, or at the end when they were staring off into the sunset. I don't know why I keep describing it that way, but that was...
I mean, that's pretty much what was happening.
Yeah, and it was like, it was like a scene, and it's very memorable.
Yeah. All right, well, I don't have anything else to add for this category, but my total came to 9.8 out of 10. Oh. The only thing that kept it from a perfect 10 was just the overuse of the Dutch angle. I still obviously liked it a lot to give it so close to perfect for the category overall, but it did knock it down and keep it from the perfect range.
Wow. It lost quite a few points for too much Dutch angle, but it still came out to a 9.0, which is still outstanding.
All right, yeah. All right, so that's going to bring us to the next category in the grid, which is going to be editing and special effects. This one, aside from special effects, I don't have too much to say. One of the things that did lose some points on was for pace, which I still gave a 9 out of 10 to, but there were just a few fight scenes that went on not significantly too long, but I did know, particularly in the final fight scene, where I just kind of drifted a little bit, not significantly so, and certainly less than in other Marvel movies, but I did, there were a few fight scenes that I felt like could have been trimmed, even if just by like 30 seconds to a minute, for my personal tastes, which I tend to zone out pretty quickly with fight scenes unless there's like dialogue thrown in or, you know, something to hold my interest. So that was one of the things of note aside from special effects.
Yeah, special effects I thought were perfect. Everything else I thought was, I didn't notice anything bad.
All right.
And there was a lot of them.
There was a lot of them.
And everything else in that category I thought was good. Nothing really stood out as bad.
Okay.
I didn't have an issue with the pacing.
Okay. I didn't think the special effects were that great. They're definitely, they still exceeded my expectations for a 2011 action movie. But particularly because we had 2 Iron Man movies before this, I thought that the destroyer armor at the end, it definitely looked CGI, which if I didn't have the first 2 Iron Man movies to compare it to, I would very easily be like, well, I mean, this was 2011. Things have changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
You know, you got to judge it for its time, and I think I would have been much more generous with my score there. But because I felt like the special effects were significantly better in, especially weirdly Iron Man 1, but even Iron Man 2, I thought surpassed it a little bit, but I still gave it, for special effects, I gave it 7 out of 10, which still exceeds expectations because it still looked good, and there were a few times in the Frost Giant fight scene in the beginning where it did look a little CGI, a little too CGI for my tastes, but that I felt like was more just its age more than it being bad. Yeah. All right, and then I don't really have much else to say about editing. It was kind of a meh category for me.
So what's your score for editing and special effects?
I gave it an 8 out of 10.
Okay. And I gave it an 8.4.
All right.
So what about the next category, sound?
Sounds, I definitely love the score in this movie.
Yeah, I liked it a lot more than the other movies because this one seemed to have more variety.
It has more variety. It's a little bit more memorable. It does still kind of suffer from that, like, once the movie's over, can you, like, remember it and hum it to yourself? Maybe, maybe not. So it does still have a little bit of that lack of memorability, but the second you hear that song, it's like, oh, this is Thor. Yeah. Like, it definitely has that strong association. It's easily identifiable. You can't mistake it for any other theme within the MCU. And it's just, I thought they did some really effective things by, and this isn't unique by any means within movie soundtracks or scores, but I thought it was particularly effective in this movie where they had, like, that main theme, like, you first hear it when you see Asgard for the first time, and it's this really epic music, and then you hear it again, like, when he's trying to get his hammer back when he first gets to Earth, and it almost has, like, a more synthetic sound to it, or I'm not very experienced with music. I'm pretty music illiterate, so I'm not sure. It just seemed like it was either, like, electronically, synthesized, or maybe it was just a different key, or it was sharper, maybe. There was something that sounded different to it, that just made it feel almost sinister, or, like, it didn't have that same, like, it shifted the mood enough. And then when he can't get the hammer, then it gets to be very orchestral, and it, the notes are drawn out a little bit longer. It's a lot sadder, which, again, like I said, this isn't unique. Like, most movies have a theme that gets variations throughout the movie.
Yeah.
But this is the first time in the MCU that we've really seen it or heard it, that we've really heard it done effectively, and it really, I just thought that theme was used to elicit emotions very, very effectively. Like, each time you hear it, it gives a slightly different emotion based on whatever variation it is. So I really loved the score overall.
Okay. One thing I noticed was the soundtrack. There was actually one song in this.
Yeah.
And only one song that I noticed. But it was an interesting choice, and it was an interesting time that they played it.
Yeah.
It's once Thor realizes he can't lift the hammer out, and it's like his lowest point, and he gets rescued by Dr. Selvig, who takes him to the bar after being told to keep him away from the bars.
Yeah.
They're in the bar, and they're drinking, and he's, like, still processing, like, how much his life has turned to crap, and how he's lost everything. This is, like, the lowest point. And in the background, you can hear the Foo Fighters learning to fly again.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty interesting and appropriate, and it was good. I liked it. I added a little bit of not extra credit, but I added a little bit for that.
As far as the general, like, sound effects and overall sound mix and design and things like that, I thought everything was pretty good. I always introduce those subcategories as if I have something to say, and I don't really in this particular movie. I just like acknowledging that there's more to sound design than music, I guess. Was there anything of note within those for you?
Yeah. Okay. It was kind of interesting that Thor was grunting a lot in this movie.
Yeah, I guess he did.
Which makes sense because he's a brute.
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning, and in Norse mythology, he wasn't a good guy. He just smashed things. He was an incredibly violent person.
He was the Hulk of Norse mythology?
I guess so, yeah. He was the god of thunder and the harvest, and then he just, like, smashed things. So it was interesting that he was, like, had that, like, brutish essence, brutish air about him.
Okay.
I don't know, there was something very primal and grunty, and he's, like, screaming and grunting and things like that.
Yeah.
Especially during the fight scenes.
Right, yeah. Okay.
I don't know, that just stood out.
You? Yeah.
Tony Stark didn't do that very much, I guess.
No, he's not a grunter. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to add for the sound category?
Nope.
All right, me neither. My total score came out to an 8.6 out of 10.
Okay, mine was an 8.8. Again, very close.
Very close. All right, so that's going to bring us to the next category, which is going to be aesthetics. As far as character aesthetics go, I have some pretty strong feelings, both positive and negative. Okay. As far as hair goes, I gave that subcategory a pretty high score, mainly for two reasons. The first is just Thor's glorious hair. Like, he's just got good hair, man. So you gotta recognize that. And then the other one, I just really appreciated that Sif just wears her hair in a ponytail and fights, because I feel like every time I see a movie with a female warrior of any type, I'm like, why would you fight with your hair down? Like, that's just, it's gonna get caught on stuff. People can grab it and pull it so easily. I mean, you could do that with a ponytail too, but it just seems so impractical. It's gonna get in your face. You're not gonna be able to see. Like, who would fight with long hair? That's just... Even Thor wears his hair in a half ponytail when it gets longer. Yeah. So I appreciated that hair design choice, I guess, for her.
That is funny, because the dwarf guy...
Oh, yeah.
He has really long ringlets that lets him loose.
Yeah.
I guess
that's a double standard. I should have taken points off, and that should have balanced out, but...
But then the Asian guy did have his hair up.
Yeah. Probably should find out his name.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know any of their names. I
don't. Threes. Yeah, I just know Sif. Okay, so that was the more positive thing I noted within the character aesthetics. So one of the negative things that I noticed, and I'm gonna admit I docked the score pretty significantly, and I considered bumping it back up, but the more I thought about it, the more I was like, it didn't meet my expectations, and there was no way around it. So costumes, I had pretty strong feelings. I love the design of all of the Asgardian costumes, like all of their warrior, armor. Like the designs are great. Even Loki's that should just be ridiculously silly, like somehow it works. And obviously it's coming straight from the comics, which helps, but like it should be silly, but the design works. But there was something about the quality that just looked, especially Thor's, but pretty much all of them, the metal looked so plasticky and almost like a Halloween costume replica. Like it was really bad. And I hate saying that because like everything else about this movie is so good, and I don't want to be like, costume designer, you did a bad job. Like I feel so bad being so critical, but it was noticeably bad, and I don't usually, like, I have a pretty high tolerance for not noticing things like that. Like usually someone has to point it out to me and like be like, oh, did you notice how bad that looked? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess maybe a little.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it, to be fair, because I don't think I noticed that in the past. So I think a lot of it is probably all the updates we've seen since then and all the movies he's been in. And I think it's improved significantly. So a lot of it's probably retrospective, looking back on it, but that's like really my only complaint, like my only real complaint within this movie is the costumes.
Yeah, I did notice that too with Heimdall a little bit. Like he has all this gold armor and stuff, but like if you look at it, you look closely, like it just doesn't quite look like metal.
Right.
Not what I would expect like shiny armor to be.
Exactly.
But I figured maybe it's some Asgardian metal. I don't know.
I don't know.
But I guess now that you mention it, yeah, I could see like going to Target and getting your Asgardian warrior Halloween costume. Yeah. It
just really I still gave the subcategory a 4.5 out of 10, which technically does meet expectations. Only because the Earth costumes like Selvig and Jane Foster, like I thought they all had unique looks, and I liked the attention to detail within, giving them each, showing their personalities through their outfits. I thought was really a nice touch. So I didn't want to go below that because I do appreciate the detail there, but the Asgardian costumes were noticeably below expectations for me.
Wow. 4.5. I think that's one of the lowest scores you've ever given anything. Well, for costumes, I gave it a perfect 10.
Wow, okay.
Yep, because it's totally different than what we've seen so far.
I agree, yeah.
And it matches the look of Asgard. And
like I said, the design
design is really cool. And it's one of those things that I think could very easily be done very badly. Like if you look at movies, older movies like the Dune movie that was directed by David Lynch.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, if you look at that, the costumes are kind of neat and interesting, but they're just so over the top that it's just, I can't take it seriously. Or if you look at Flash Gordon.
Oh, yeah, classic.
Yeah, that like over the top, absurd fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
And this is very close to that, but not. Yeah, it's very close, but not quite.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah.
So I really liked it, even though the metal. Now that you mention it, yeah, that's a weird metal, but it's a weird metal.
Okay. All right. Difference of opinion there.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the, if you're all right moving on a little bit, about the more environmental aesthetics, the sets, locations, props?
I thought all of it was beautiful.
All right.
I think Asgard has a really neat look. It's very high fantasy.
Yeah.
But still sci-fi-ish a little bit.
Okay,
especially with that space background that it had.
Yeah, that was nice. A lot of the time.
Yeah. That was really interesting. And I think that kind of paved the way for some future movies. And then the town itself, because I guess there's really only 2 locations
for the most part.
Yeah, and then the town itself, I thought was great. Looked like a dusty little town.
Yeah,
sleepy little town with a main street and grandpa's
okay furniture.
Yeah, okay furniture. That's right. I could see like grandpa in front of his store on a rocking chair, whittling or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
like it just seems like that kind of town and. Yeah, I thought everything was beautiful locations. All
right. I agree with particularly the Earth settings. I just love that little town. It just captures the essence of small towns and I don't know, just everything, like the little diner they go to just felt so specific. So I really like the town. Asgard mostly was good. I feel like it fell a little bit into the same category as the costumes, not nearly as severely, but there were just a few things here and there that looked, maybe a little, I guess cheap is the best word, or just fake, not quite. I don't know, I can't even remember specifically what it was that I noticed, but I definitely felt like the Asgard settings were almost there, but not quite. Particularly, I think, like, maybe like the throne room and things like that. Because like there's definitely things where like it's Thor and his Lady Sif and the Warriors 3, and they're like just hanging out and talking. And I thought those more the more lived in spaces looked really good. Yeah. And the more like royal meeting halls or whatever, there were things here and there, and maybe in Heimdall's dome or whatever. Yeah, I feel like there were maybe a few things. And some of that very well may fall more into props than settings, but I feel like it was just kind of set design in general. There were just little things here and there. I still gave the category, I gave sets and locations 9 out of 10, so it's still very, very high.
I think the lived in look is part of that, when you said lived in, because if you look at things like Star Trek, everything's very clean, very pristine, very like futuristic, and if you look at something like Star Wars, everything is dirty. Everything is breaking down. Everything is very lived in. Yeah. And so you can look at like early Star Wars and it still looks, I mean, it's not like aesthetically nice to look at, but it still looks good.
Right.
It looks like real stuff, like real physical metal things.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at early Star Trek, it looks like a set.
Absolutely.
And so I think this is kind of the same thing. The things that are lived in look good, but the things that are like the throne room or the exterior of the buildings, I think they were trying to make it all shiny and polished and really pristine and very clean, almost like heavenly. Yeah. And it does kind of, maybe it doesn't stand the test of time as well?
Maybe, but yeah, I think I know what you mean. How did you feel about the props throughout?
I'm trying to think of what props. There's like the hammer and
there's
Loki's
really
scepter.
Yeah, there's really only one thing that stands out to me, and I know I'm not the first person to notice this. Like, there's been a whole South Park episode about it, basically. But all the pumpkins. Why were there so many pumpkins in that one feast hall or whatever?
Oh, yeah,
like when he flips the table, and it's just like a table of pumpkins. Pumpkins go everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, you could have done maybe a couple other different kinds of squash or something. I mean, I know that's already been pointed out. I'm not saying anything new with that complaint, but, like, I mostly I'm just curious. I just want to know the answer. Why so many pumpkins? There's got to be a reason. That was really the only thing notable within props. That's why I asked.
That's why you gave it a 2 out of 10?
No, I did give it an 8.5 out of 10, though, which is significantly lower than a lot of the other categories. Although not within, I don't know, aesthetics overall. I think it might be my lowest, pretty much my lowest, except for impact on film, which we'll get to next.
That's surprising.
It surprised me too. But as I was filling it out, I was like, you know what? I stand by it. This movie is absolutely gorgeous and it is aesthetically pleasing, but it's because of the cinematography much more so than and just an amazing looking cast, that's
sure,
things like that. But as far as costumes, settings, I mean, the settings are good too. Mostly the costumes is by far the biggest thing that dragged this category down for me. It was just a little too unforgivable for me. And like I said, I mean, it sucks because, like I said, the design, I recognize everything you said about, it's unique and it fits the setting. Like, it's gorgeous designs. It's just something in the execution, quality-wise, got a little lost.
Yeah, okay.
So unless there's anything else you want to add, what was your total for aesthetics?
9.4. Outstanding.
Wow, this is the first category we've really gone different ways on. Although mine's not that low. I gave it a 7.7 out of 10, which does still exceed expectations, but is definitely the lowest category so far.
I don't know about the next category. Impact on film.
This one is a tough one. Because it is not a favorite amongst fans or critics. Yeah. And so it does suck that it drags both of our scores down a little bit, which I recognize is, I'm not going to call it a flaw within the grid, because I think part of what makes a perfect movie is that a large amount of people would think that it's perfect, or that it would influence a large amount of people.
See that?
I think it's more than just one person's opinion that helps form the worth of a movie, I guess. But as far as looking at it from a personal worth of how do I rate this movie. It is a little unfortunate in a case like this, especially where we both love this movie and critics not so much, and fans are pretty lukewarm on it too, which I cannot wrap my head around it. I don't understand it. I don't get it. But anyway, all of that said, so this category is split up into 3 separate subcategories, which is going to be critical impact, audience cult impact, and historical inspirational impacts. For critical impact, even though I knew this movie doesn't get that much critical attention, I was still shocked at how low this was. I went to Metacritic, which is usually what I do for the critical impact score. It was only I think it was a 5.6, or a 56, I should say, or maybe a 57, which I then just divided by 10, which I probably should have rounded down to a 5.5, but I wanted to give this movie as much of a boost as possible, I'll admit. So I rounded up to a 6 for critical impact, which just seems way too low, but that's what the score is, so that's what I went with. And then audience and cult impact, I looked around at several different aggregate sites, which actually the audience impacts or audience scores were higher than I thought it would be, considering that this movie is usually pretty low. I've been looking at a lot of since Infinity War just came out and is in theaters as we record this. I've been looking at a lot of all 19 Marvel movies ranked, and Thor is usually right at about number 15 out of 19, and I just don't understand that. So that said, I was surprised that the audience scores were a little bit high. So based on what I found, I kind of converted, averaged them together, and rounded up a little bit significantly, and gave
a little bit significantly. Okay.
I did, yeah. I think the average. I looked at 4 different sites and averaged the scores out, and it came out to a 7.4, I think, and I went ahead and rounded all the way up to an 8. Sure. Instead of a 7.5, even though I probably should have rounded down because it does get so low in those rankings that I was looking at, but I don't think this movie deserves to get knocked down too much, just because other people don't like it. So I did try to be generous in this category. And then historical and inspirational impact, I went pretty high on this one and gave it a 7.5, largely because it is the first movie within this sub-franchise, I guess. We still haven't come up with a term for it. But within the Thor trilogy, this is what started it, and it's another step closer to the Avengers, and it's the most different, I guess, than what we've seen before. Yeah. It's definitely a deviation, but still very much so continues forward the legacy. It definitely still has its ties very strongly with the movies we've seen so far. So I felt okay giving it a pretty high score, largely because of the impact within the franchise as a whole, as opposed to I looked at historical impact within that context more so than anything else. Okay. And gave it 7.5 out of 10, which is probably a little high, but like I said, I was really rounding up with these ones just to give it as much of a boost as possible. But that said, the average for those 3 still came out to the lowest by far within the grid for me, which was a 7.17. Which is the lowest by far.
Okay. For impact on film, I tried not to round up too much on this one, although I totally understand the temptation because everyone else is wrong.
I agree.
For critical impact, it seems like it was definitely below expectations. So I gave it a 3 out of 10 because that's right in the center of below expectations. I disagree.
Yeah.
And I think I have valid reasons for disagreeing.
I agree with your valid reasons for disagreeing.
But I'm trying to call it like I see it.
Yeah, all right.
Below expectations is the gist that I got from critical impact. The other 2, the audience and cult impact and historical impact, I kind of use the same reasoning for both of these. And that is that, like you pointed out, it's very low on people's list. Yeah. For whatever reason, people don't like this movie that much. But people seem to really like Loki. And Thor seems to be doing okay.
Yeah.
Like the characters themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Even
fan
Selvig
favorites.
is he shows up in several other movies. Yeah. And he's funny and people like him. He has some of the best lines. I'm going to need to get my pants or something like that. So it starts out pretty low because people rate it pretty low, but then I bumped it up a little bit because people like the characters so much. And the characters play major, major roles in the next, 15 movies? 16 movies? I mean, I guess not every single one of them, but...
But still several, though. Yeah. We've got Civil War, the next 2 Thor movies, next 2 Avengers movies. It's at least 5 right there.
Yeah. So, I think this, even though people don't rate this movie very highly, I think people like the characters enough, and it is influential enough within MCU, and I do think it changed the look of, or influenced the look of another movie that we'll get to eventually. So I think that bumps it up a little bit. So I gave it a 5 out of 10 for those 2 subcategories. So the total impact on film, 4.3.
Oof. I get it. I mean, that's an honorable way to look at it. Now I feel bad for rounding up so much, but...
Well, there's nothing wrong with correcting other people's opinions when they're wrong. When they're that wrong.
I just don't understand it.
I don't either. How about overall enjoyment, the next category?
I gave this one... You're going to be so disappointed. I did not give it a perfect 10. I did give it 9.5, though. The only reason I did not give it a perfect 10, and I know this is getting redundant, but the forced love story in the last act... it bothers me enough that it does knock my enjoyment down a little bit.
Totally understand.
I mean, it's just... I've already explained it in 2 other categories now, so I won't reiterate it, but that's literally the only thing keeping this movie from a perfect 10.
I understand that. I agree with it, but it didn't bother me that much, because to me it's like, well, you have to do that if you're going to make a movie. So I just kind of expect that, and I think that's true of almost all movies, really.
Yeah, but you can do it better, at least. Because I liked I didn't have a problem with the fact that he had a love interest, and I love Natalie Portman, and I think she's one of the most well-developed love interests in the whole MCU. Like, I like her character.
Yeah.
They treat her like shit in the sequel, and there's a reason she's never come back since then, but that's a whole other story. But like, she's she has agency. She affects the whole course of the movie independently of her relationship with Thor. Like, there's a lot of really positive things going on with her character, and I like her character, and I like their relationship, and they're more, playful, flirtatious, attraction in that regard. Like, it makes perfect sense. Like, of course, these 2 very attractive individuals thrown together in this grand adventure, of course there's going to be excitement and chemistry there. But to then take that very base emotion that was never developed in the script and turn it into, they're soulmates and they're going to search for each other, and they're star-crossed lovers, someday they'll be reunited. And I'm just like... And I think it damages her character, too, because she has so much agency, and then she just becomes this... she's basically the character that she makes fun of in Annihilation, where it's like, I'm gonna... like, while you're gone, I'm gonna go outside and look at the night sky and think that you're looking at the self-same stars, or... I saw that movie a few times, but it's that trope of like, I'm gonna long for you and never move on, even though we never even had sex or anything.
Right. Well, she's not pining away. She's still very active. She's like,
she is
busting her ass to do some serious science.
But the reason doesn't seem to be science anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
I just feel like
anyway, I get what you're saying.
I know. It just could have been better.
Yeah.
And especially because it's Natalie Portman, and I'm like, she's awesome, and she can do anything, and you just make her the pining
but she's not
girl left behind.
But anyways, all right.
If they'd done something better in the sequel, I might agree with you, but that's not the direction they take her in. Anyway.
Overall enjoyment. Oh, did you finish your answer? I think
yeah.
You did. Yeah. All right, I guess I declared that you have finished your.
I mean, I'm just gonna keep saying the same thing over and over again. So.
Okay, overall enjoyment. I gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. I love this movie. This is probably my favorite MCU movie, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
I was gonna say not just MCU, which is probably true of me too. It's I don't know if I would say one of my favorites, but easily.
Yeah.
I'd say easily top 20, which makes it sound low, but I like a lot of movies.
Yeah. So for me, I love the theme. I love Thor's quest to get his shit together and make himself worthy. I think that's a great quest. I think that applies to everyone, no matter where you are in life. I love the humor. There's so much humor, and some of it, like I mentioned with Agent Coulson, son of Cole.
Yeah.
Like, it's so subtle and it's delivered so straight that you don't even notice it unless you're really looking for it.
Yeah.
And I love how it ties everything together. I love how it goes its own way. It introduces Asgard and all this mythology. This is some crazy stuff, because so far we've just seen some nerd with this suit, which is really cool, but that's we could have that in 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
Whereas this is just totally different. It's totally out there. And I love Loki, and Odin is cool. Everything just comes together so well. I really enjoy watching this movie. Perfect 10 out of 10.
All right. Did you give Thor any extra credit?
I gave it 4 points of extra credit. And we've already mentioned one of them. One of the things that I like about it is that I just love Norse mythology. So it gets a point for that. Okay. Maybe that's not a good reason. I don't know. Whatever. It gets a point for that. The first book that I ever wanted to read and remember reading was in 5th grade, and it was about Norse mythology.
All right.
So it's great. And this movie had a ton of really small details, like how Loki and Heimdall are at each other's throat almost the whole time. And in Norse mythology, they hate each other so very much. Yeah. They actually end up killing each other at the same time at the end of the world. Because Norse mythology is so cool like that. And there's other subtle things like Odin's horse has 8 legs.
That was actually something I gave it extra credit for. I never even noticed that until this time around. Then I was like, that horse has some extra legs.
Yeah, and that's true to Norse mythology. Yeah. He didn't have his ravens, which he has in mythology. But he was missing an eye. There's all kinds of little things. I mean, they don't follow Norse mythology 100%.
Well, sure, yeah.
But that's to be expected. But when they do, it's really cool, and I really like that. So it gets an easy point of extra credit for that. I gave it another point of extra credit just because I love the theme of you have to get your shit together and make yourself worthy. That is, of all the MCU movies, that's my favorite one. I'm a total sucker for that. Any short story or TV show or anything that even comes close to that, I'm probably going to really like it.
All right.
So another easy point of extra credit. And then, like we said at the very beginning, this is the first Marvel movie I saw with you in theaters, so it gets an extra credit point for that.
All right.
And then lastly, the South Park episode.
Yeah.
It's perfect South Park for a perfect movie.
I don't even remember anything about that episode except the pumpkins.
For stuffing! It's so over the top. It's so crazy. It's fun. It's like there's so much fun in this movie that it is spilled over. So
sure.
It's like a perfect companion piece to the Thor movie.
All right.
And that's why I gave it 4 extra credit points.
All right. I also gave it some extra credit. I gave it 3. Well, I gave it extra credit for 3 things. I have my extra credit points because I tend to be a little overly generous with them. So the 3 things I gave it extra credit for. The first we already mentioned, and that was the horse with 8 legs. That was just a cool detail I had never noticed before, and that does come straight from mythology, and it was relatively subtle. I mean, I tend to be a little oblivious about things like that, but
it had nothing to do with the plot.
Yeah, and it wasn't.
Yeah, you wouldn't notice it.
Yeah,
unless you were really paying attention, I think.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool. And I gave it another. The other thing I gave extra credit for is just because Natalie Portman's in it,
sure.
Which I know is blatantly double dipping into the casting category. But to take somebody who, although she came from Star Wars prequels and stuff. So it's not like she's a stranger to franchises, but she tends to do much more serious movies. So to take, you've got even Anthony Hopkins too. You've got all these serious actors in a comic book movie, which I just think is exciting and gives some merit at least. The Academy is still going to ignore any genre movie, especially superheroes, and there's still a lot of issues as far as critical acclaim. Well, not necessarily critical acclaim. Critics have come around quite a bit since 2008, but just to have these bigger, more serious, very, very talented actors in a superhero movie is
the third superhero movie, and a really weird
fourth.
What?
Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor. This is the fourth.
Yeah, the fourth. Sorry. You can edit that out. Yeah, the fourth movie. And a really weird movie, too.
Yeah.
Like, they really went all out. They took some risks with this.
Yeah. So that was the thing I gave it extra credit for. And then the last was, taking this character that in the comic books is, at least from what I've gathered, seems to be known for being on the silly side. And I think a lot of people expected this movie. I remember being like, I'm kind of nervous about this one. Like, it seems like who even cares about Thor? Like, it just seems so odd. And like you were saying, like going from Iron Man to Thor, like that's a pretty big jump as far as like hyper realism with Iron Man to straight up fantasy in Thor. Like there's a lot of reasons for people to be skeptical, and then I think a lot of people just expected it to be, just either intentionally or unintentionally just really silly, and then to be able to take that idea and make it something not just serious and like a good dramatic movie with a lot of comedic balance, which is nice, but like it's just downright Shakespearean. Like, it's basically King Lear, it's so Shakespearean and so classical. But it's Thor in a modern world. Like, it's
a guy who flies by spinning a hammer.
Exactly.
None of this makes sense, but it all fits together so well.
Yeah, so I gave it some extra credit just for being able to find that balance, which I think they did really, really well. So my extra credit for those three things came out to 1.5 points, because I just divided by 2. So that's my extra credit.
All right, so what was your total score?
My total score came out to a 91.27, which is outstanding.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mine was 92.73.
Wow, very close.
So yeah, very close. And this is, I'm pretty happy with that. I think it would have been higher if impact on film was higher.
Oh yeah.
I went.
You were being honest with the score and what you thought it deserved.
This is okay. I think it should be a little bit higher, but this is okay. It's probably going to be... I would not be surprised if this is the highest score that I give anything in the MCU.
I can only think of 2 that might be close.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't think they're going to be better.
I can think of 2 that we will be very close, but slightly less.
Yep.
Probably the same.
I'm sure. Yeah, we'll verify after we record. I know one of them for sure is going to be the same. The third I'm not positive on. But yeah, this is... I just can't even fathom how it so consistently gets ranked right around number 15 out of 19 when I'm pretty positive it's going to be my number 1. Yeah. Or at least within the top 3 instead of the bottom. I'm sure it'll be bottom 5 after Ant-Man and the Wasp comes out in a month. I cannot... Like, I understand everybody has different opinions, and like, obviously people are going to rank things differently. That's why I wanted to start Marvel Mondays, is so that we can rank it and figure out what our rankings are, because everyone is different. But to be so different, like, that's so low, and I just... Like, it's down there with The Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2, which we gave awful scores to. Yeah. Or maybe awful is harsh, but definitely low scores. Like, I agree with those should be at the bottom, but then to lump this in with those, I just...
Yeah, I don't understand.
It blows my mind. But that said, before we wrap this up, I did want to, because of all the reasons I just said, I did want to take a look at some criticisms of this movie, and maybe we can get a counter argument going for some of it.
Correct some misinformation out there.
So the first thing I wanted to point out, I mentioned that on a lot of rankings, it's right about number 15, and that seems to match up pretty well with the Rotten Tomatoes score. So it is, as of right now, it is number 15 out of all the Marvel movies on Rotten Tomatoes, but it still has a 77%, which isn't bad, but it seems to be significantly worse than all the others. or at least worse enough. But the weird thing is, it doesn't really say anything negative, because I'm looking at an editorial that someone from Rotten Tomatoes wrote, where it lists the ranking and then gives like a description of why it ranks it, and it doesn't say anything bad about Thor. So maybe it's just a lowest common denominator type thing, where it's not bad, but it doesn't do anything good to other people's opinions, at least. I don't know, but I thought that because most people just go to Rotten Tomatoes for movie reviews, I wanted to bring that up. But then as far as actual criticisms, the first list I wanted to look at is from Collider.com, and they ranked the Marvel movies recently, and Thor, again, came at number 15, and what they have to say about Thor is, Thor seems fairly counterintuitive. He's a Norse god, he has awesome powers, now let's strip him of those powers for the majority of this movie and stick him in New Mexico.
Yeah, that's I don't see that as a bad thing. That's what makes this cool. And in other origin stories, this would be a montage, right?
I could see that, sure.
Oh, I need to become king, and then like go crack some skulls and do whatever, and now you're the king. So
do you think there's? I'm only asking because I have heard this complaint from other places, not just from this list, that people dislike the movie because he is powerless for a lot of the movie. But I mean I agree. I think that's what makes this, because it's not about his strength, it's about his worth, his personality, right. his ability to lead. It's about his character. And so the whole movie, like, yes, he has no powers, but he has to earn those powers back. Right. That's the origin. And if you think about it too, like, most origin story movies, the hero has no powers for half the movie.
Right.
Like, usually, maybe not half the movie, but like, this movie just kind of rearranged things a little bit. He has powers in the first bit, then he doesn't, then he does again, whereas most movies it's more of a slant of
Sure.
No powers, has no control of powers, now has control. So I feel like it just rearranged things a little differently, and people seem to really have strong feelings against that. But I think that's what makes it so interesting, because it becomes a character study now, and it's, what makes a hero. It's not the superpowers. It's what it's, right. And it's not even necessarily what you do with the superpowers. It's
who you are
character.
As a person,
exactly,
character, yeah.
And that's what this whole movie is about. Which I love, and I know you do too. Yeah. You've talked about that. I'm kind of just reiterating stuff at this point.
Yeah, if he didn't lose his powers and he didn't go through all that, it would just be 2 hours of some guy with a hammer smashing things.
Exactly, it'd be Incredible Hulk all over again.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk about that when we review.
Yeah.
The movie that we won't name again.
The movie that shall not be named.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a list coming from Business Insider. Didn't know they were in the business of movie reviews, but apparently they are.
They're inside every business.
I guess so. So they ranked all of the Marvel movies, and they put Thor at number 17 of 19. And this is their only reason. With the Collider one, I just read the first little bit because it was a bit longer. This just has one paragraph explaining why it's the third worst Marvel movie in their opinion. Remember when very serious British man Kenneth Branagh made a Thor movie? What a gas! The first Thor movie is not bad by any means, and it's actually quite fun, but mostly because Loki is in it. But it's a lot more formulaic than what the MCU movies have become. It's set up the wrong tone for Thor being taken way too seriously, but Hawkeye is in this movie more than he is in Infinity War, which is nice. I don't even quite know what to make out of that review.
I'm not sure what they're trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like they liked it decently.
I disagree that it was more formulaic.
That bit threw me too. Because like I was saying, it breaks the origin story formula in every way. It completely deconstructs it.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it does.
I mean, aren't most comic book origin stories like gamma radiation or radioactive spiders or born on another planet? Like, it's just a thing that happens.
Yeah.
And now you're a superhero.
Exactly.
After a montage.
Right. And yeah, I just don't quite know where the formulaic thing, because later movies I feel like become much more formulaic and fall into that hole. Whereas this, I mean, yes, it does follow a formula, but every well-structured movie does. And if it feels too formulaic, it's because it's following formulas set up like in Shakespeare and in mythology and in
thousands of years ago.
Exactly. Like, this is not a new story by any means, but that doesn't mean it can't be fresh and it can't, like, I don't know. Yeah, I tend to take issue in general when people just complain that things are formulaic. I feel like that's not necessarily a valid complaint. Maybe too predictable is a better complaint, but everything follows a formula. You don't follow a formula, you just end up with a hot mess.
Just random crap.
Exactly. So yeah, that's kind of an odd complaint for me because, I mean, yes, it follows a formula, but I thought it did actually a really good job of like I said, deconstructing the origin story formula. And
especially once you've seen 19 of these movies.
Yeah.
And once Marvel figures out we can turn $100 million into $700 million or whatever it works out to.
Right.
They stick to that formula. I mean, they tweak it a little bit, but I can't blame them. I would do that too if it was my money.
Yeah, and it still is enjoyable. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say I don't like the later Marvel movies. Like, I still like them.
But this is, I don't see how someone can think this is the most formulaic.
No.
Not even close.
All right, so that was.
So they're also wrong.
I mean,
it's subjective and all that, but I think people maybe are looking for totally different things in these movies. I think that everyone just wants like a fun smash, good guys beat bad guys.
Which I feel like this, well, I guess maybe it doesn't have enough of it. I don't know. That brings us, I think this next one might have a complaint that I've heard in several other places. This list comes from Esquire.com, and they list Thor at number 16. And their review is one sentence long, and this is something I feel like I've heard. This is a common complaint. A superhero movie posing as a cheap Lord of the Rings knockoff, Thor ended with a team of LARPers finding an empty CGI suit of armor.
That's a very dismissive way of looking at it. I mean, I guess it's not untrue.
Yeah, I mean, but
you can do that with any movie. You can say Lord of the Rings is about little people returning jewelry.
Sure, yeah.
That's true. That's kind of missing the whole movie.
Right. Yeah, and the whole... I've heard a lot of people argue, like, well, the whole, like, climactic fight scene is him fighting an empty suit of armor. And I'm like, well, first of all, there's a climactic fight scene after that where he fights Loki face to face and destroys the Bifrost and ends up losing his brother and thinking he's dead. So, like, that's not even the final fight scene, first of all.
Right.
And second of all, like, it's not him fighting an empty suit of armor, it's him coming face to face with his brother and trying to do the right thing and becoming worthy. Like, there's so much more.
It's even worse than that if you're looking at it that way. It's him apologizing to an empty suit of armor.
Right.
And then dying.
Exactly. Because it's not about the fight. It's about what are you willing to do to protect people. You know, it's not about running in and fighting. It's not about starting wars. It's about doing what you can to preserve peace if possible and being a wise leader and you know, doing the right thing and not the brave thing or you know, whatever the case may be. Like, he's learning a lesson. he's taking a stand and he's doing what he thinks is right, and that's what makes him worthy to be Thor. He's willing to say, don't hurt them, they're innocent, do whatever you need to do to me. Like, I don't know what I did to wrong you, but
I think maybe that's a little more complicated than people want from a movie. They just want pure good guy, pure bad guy, good guy smashes bad guy,
but then
wins the girl.
I agree that's probably part of it, but what I don't get is that people go on and on about their complaints with Thor, but then they seem to praise it at the same time for being like, well, but we get Loki out of it. And it's like, yeah, you do get Loki out of it. Like, that's a big part of the movie.
Yeah.
How can you not? And, like, I don't understand how... And like you were saying, both of the characters are fan favorites. And I don't understand how you can love the characters so much and be so dismissive of how they became those characters. Like, it's such a...
They're so intertwined.
Yeah, and I don't know, it just...
That is weird.
I don't know. Alright, so there's one more. I guess this one, it's from the Wall Street Journal, and it's a reviewer I actually really like. He has a podcast that I listen to, and I usually agree with what he has to say. This is Joe Morgenstern of the Wall Street Journal. He gave this movie Well, I don't know how he scores it, but on Metacritic, however he scored it, converted to a 10 out of 100.
What?
Yeah. And I don't subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, so I can't read the full review, so I'll just read what I can see, I guess. So it starts off, like Thor's hammer, this, I don't even know what this word is, Ersatz, maybe? Or, I don't know. What is that word?
Ersatz? It's like Ersatz? Jumbled up or mixed up, I think.
Okay.
Like odds and ends.
Ersatz?
I've never actually said it. I've only read it.
Okay, I'll go with yours. Okay. So, like Thor's hammer, this Ersatz epic bludgeons its victims into submission. What's more, it requires them to stare at the source of their punishment through 3D glasses. No need for submitting blindly to that. The 3D process in question is one of those aftermarket fakes that his whole criticism seems to be about 3D. Like, you don't have to go see it in 3D, dude. But anyway, the 3D process in question is one of those aftermarket fakes that enhances mainly mid-distance bodies and structural elements within the frame, so you can take the glasses off during most of the close-ups. And much of the movie is shot in pitiless close-ups. That's about all I can see. I guess I don't know, the whole 3D criticism. Don't see it in 3D, dude. Like, we all knew that was a fad. If it's not shot in 3D, don't go see it in 3D. So I don't know why he was harping on that so much. But I wish I could see more of what he had to say about it. But he seems to dislike the close-ups, which I thought were just fantastic. Like I said, the face acting and the reaction shots were phenomenal. And then just the compositions within the close-ups, like, they were very well framed and very well acted.
Yeah, we both really liked that.
Yeah, so I just thought that was interesting. Mostly, I guess I didn't really need to read any of that. But I mean, a 10 out of 100, and I every once in a while, he doesn't seem to like Marvel movies. I feel like he gives most of them kind of low scores, but
I think that, I'm guessing that's what explains a lot of it. People either just don't like Marvel movies, or they just expected something different. They expected a silly man smashing things with a hammer.
I think that's a big part of it too, yeah.
And gets the girl, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more complex than that. And this movie is actually, in a lot of ways, saying that's bad. That's
what you should absolutely not do. Yeah, don't just go into battle. Don't be hot-headed. That's a phrase, right? Yeah, like don't
be that arrogant, self-righteous
boy.
Yeah,
like go. Yeah, like,
so I guess if that's the kind of movie you want to see, and the first act of this is saying no, I guess people would be
but I feel like
cranky.
the Incredible Hulk, though, I mean, I don't know, like, that movie doesn't exactly glorify it either. I guess by the end it does, but his whole thing is like, I don't want to be that. But I guess the whole point of that is to, I don't know, why am I going back to the Incredible Hulk? That movie was a hot mess. But all right, well, I guess that's all I really wanted to say about just some of the reviews that I've seen. I could find more, but I feel like that about covers the most common criticisms that I've heard.
Yeah, I think it's just people. From that and a few things that I've seen, it's people who are not judging it for what it is and what it's trying to be and how well it does that. They're judging it for not being the very simple good guy, bad guy, big muscles, win the girl. Which, I mean, that's what people do, I guess. But it is a bummer that it's so unappreciated.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that about wraps it up. Is there anything you wanted to add about Thor?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's just one quote that stood out in my mind. It's kind of funny. One of the Warriors 3 was getting yelled at, and he jumped up and said, "Do not mistake my appetite for apathy."
That is one of my favorite moments.
Just yet another.
I gotta find out their names because I like dialogue. I always just want to call him the dwarf because he fits that archetype, but he's not even a dwarf. He's just a really hungry guy. But I love the Warriors 3. I wish, it's kind of a bummer that it's Lady Sif and the Warriors 3. Why is it not just the Warriors 4?
Because they're not ladies like she is.
But she's also a warrior.
Yeah, I think lady is like a designation. Like, it's not just that you're female. I think it's like a captain or an admiral.
I thought it was more like like, you're married to someone.
I don't know. Maybe we'll never know.
That could just be in specific. Like, I think I'm thinking of, like, Victorian times.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or maybe I'm thinking of Dame.
That's definitely something.
Is
that a wife of a duke?
No, it's the same rank as a knight.
Oh, okay.
Just female.
So I think that that finally about wraps up Thor, unless there's anything you thought of to add. I know there's always something to add.
I did have a few quotes, but I've gone on long enough.
All right, fair enough. So that wraps up our nitty-gritty review for Thor. So for upcoming reviews, we have the very first non-Marvel review coming up. It's not with Trystan, but I talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey with my sister Jessie, and that is going to be posted on Friday, May 25th. If you're interested in the next Marvel one, that's going to be coming out on Monday, May 28th, and we'll be reviewing Captain America: The First Avenger. So until then, if you're interested in learning how to support Gritty Films, you can check out our Patreon page. That's going to be at patreon.com/grittyfilms, and that's again Gritty Films, spelled GRIDDY films. And I think that's about it. If you're so inclined and you want to rate and review this podcast on iTunes, that would be awesome. And other than that, that is going to wrap it up for this review of Thor. See you next time.